Hi guys, so first we're going to start out in the new Unit 10 blue packet with imaginary and complex numbers. Remember that this packet was not numbered, so if we're looking at this page, Powers of I, this is page 2. We should have numbered this one page 2. If you weren't here or you didn't number it, please find this page, and this is page 2. So just to go over what we learned on Friday before the break, there are only 4 cases for a power of I and what it represents. We have to remember from page 1, the fact about the imaginary unit I, it is the equivalent of the square root of -1, which in the past we were not able to ever take the square root of a negative number. But now, by splitting up any radical and pulling out that -1, we can now take the square root, or simplify the radical of the positive version, and then just put the I there to represent that this was actually a negative value. So this is an imaginary number. Okay, and we did the same thing here. Instead of taking the square root of -9, we're taking the square root of +9 and using this square root of -1 as our I, and the square root of 9 is 3. So the answer is 3 to represent the square root of 9, and I to represent the negative. Okay, and so on. So we did these examples together in class. So back to our powers of I. This is something that we can do on the calculator, or this is something that you can do with long division, and we went over both of those ways. Just quickly to go over the 4 cases, anything, even an imaginary unit, anything raised to the 0 power is always equal to 1. That is one of our basic laws of exponents that we've been reviewing throughout the year, and you've learned that since probably 8th grade. Similarly, this fact that anything raised to the 1st power is just itself. So these two should pretty much make good sense to us. I squared, well, we just said that I itself is the square root of -1. So I squared would be those times each other, right? And in that case, the square roots would just cancel out. We could also think of it as the square root of -1 squared. Well, the square root and the squared cancel each other out and leave us with the -1. Okay, so I squared is -1. This one, put a star around it, box it. This is going to be something that shows up a ton. And then I cubed is -I. So any case, any I raised to any power is going to give us one of these answers. 1I, -1, or -I. So on page 2, we did example 2A through D in class. And I showed you guys that, for example, in A, we could do this by doing long division. Okay, we would divide this power by 4 because there are only 4 cases that we could come across. Those are the 4 cases we just went over. And when we do long division, 4 goes into 38 9 times, and it leaves us with a remainder of 2. So the remainder is actually the case that we're going to be using. So I to the 38th power is going to be equivalent to I to the 2nd power, or I squared, which we know to be -1. Okay, so we could do it that way by memorizing the 4 cases and using the remainder as our exponent. Or we could do this on our calculator. You could just put in I, which is 2nd decimal, right, all the way at the bottom, the decimal, the dot, gives us the I. And when we raise that to the 38th power, it will give us our answer. Now, I'm using the app, so it's just telling me it's -1. But on our calculators, it will give you something like this. Because since we're entering it in with an imaginary number, it has to give you back an imaginary number as well. And what we said is that this is the real part of our answer, and this is the imaginary part. This is technically saying there are 0 imaginary parts left, so there's no i's left. It's just -1. Okay, so if you get something like this, that's what it means. If your answer is just I or -I, it will just give you the I or the -I. And we saw that when we did B and C. So if you weren't here, try typing these into your calculator and you'll see you'll just get I and -I. but it's good practice to input it. And then for I to the 40th, it was one of our real number answers. So the answer is just 1 because even though it says plus 0i, that means there's no i's left over. So we just get rid of it. Okay. That's our quick review of what we did last week. Now, any of these we could just put on the calculator. Okay, you could just type it in and it will give you an answer either like this or just I or negative I, but it will give you something that you should be able to translate. And now I want to skip to page 3. Let's look at number 7 and 8 just to practice these skills really quickly. Okay, now in number 7, it is giving us an input, right? F of I instead of f of x. So everywhere that there's an x, just like we would if this was telling us, for example, find f of 5, we would plug in a 5. Well, here we're going to plug in an I. So this becomes I cubed minus 2I squared. Well, I know that I cubed, and if you don't memorize your cases, you could just put it in the calculator. I know that I cubed simplifies to negative I, and I know that I squared is negative 1. So now I'm left with something I could simplify a little bit further. I have negative I, and then negative 2 minus times negative 1 is positive 2. Okay, and the only answer choice that matches up where we have a negative I and a positive 2 is answer choice 4. Okay, now I want you to try number 8. I'm going to start you off. Remember that if there is a negative square root, we're going to take out a negative 1 as a square root, which is automatically going to give us an I in our answer. And then we're going to make our radicands positive. So this becomes a square root of positive 300. That is not a perfect square. So you do need to simplify that as normal. Okay, so please do that. Simplify this radical and see which value you end up with. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? All right, and I'm going to have you guys input that in a Schoology assignment.